Hello and welcome back to another video on this channel. In this video I want to share a few tricks on how you can rearrange the compositor workspace in Blender, specifically on how you can create separate preview windows for the viewer and composite node. I personally am not a fan of how the workspace is currently provided with Blender. It encourages artists to use the background feature for previewing their composite, which isn't really that great since it often happens that your node tree blocks the preview. So for example, if you want to change a value in a node and see how that affects your preview, you always have to move your node tree around awkwardly. Also, if you want to zoom in on a specific part of your render, you can't use the provided handles once your preview is zoomed in so far that they are outside of the editor. This actually happens more often than you might expect. All of this led to me often fiddling around with the position and zoom values in the sidebar until I got a result that was acceptable to work with. On top of that, some people have experienced the background flickering or being turned off randomly. Overall, my experience hasn't been great as my workflow is often interrupted. I found myself often fighting the background feature, and I see similar struggles from other artists as well. A channel called Game Abuse Studios also created a video on that topic a month ago, but he only talked about creating a separate preview of the composite node and encourages users to avoid the viewer node altogether, while overlooking that the same can be done for the viewer node as well, which comes with a few benefits. By also utilizing the viewer node, you can have two previews. I personally have the viewer node where I'm currently working and the composite node to see the final composite. And you can keep your muscle memory of shortcuts from the other node editors, like for example Ctrl+Shift+Left click to toggle through the outputs of a node and have them connected to a viewer node automatically. There's also a similar hotkey with O for the composite node, but then your muscle memory is broken and you can't toggle through multiple outputs. It only connects to the first output of a node. But enough ranting, let's actually get into the tutorial now. So first of all, let's use nodes. And as you can see, I already rendered out the same frame again, which we can work with now. And the first thing I'm gonna do is switch this over to GPU. Also, I'm gonna be using full precision. If you want, you can also use it as auto precision. It doesn't really affect any of the effects. And now we're gonna be making some structural changes. First of all, I don't really need a dope sheet here. I prefer to just use this timeline, because the simple keyframes I would maybe do in the compositor, I can still see them in the timeline. You can put the header, for example, at the bottom if you want it more resembling what it was before. But I personally like it at the top because that way I have an easier access to the buttons and they're just a bit more in my view. So the nice thing is when you change this to an image editor, all of the backdrops here, the backdrop image, which we can now remove, you have access to that here in an internal image that Blender saves as the name viewer node. And if you split it in half, you also can actually use the render result here. And as you can see, the images at the top automatically get updated as I make changes in my node graph here. So the original video by Game Abuse Studios also had a file browser to import images. I don't personally need it, but we still have this space here, which we don't really need. What you can do maybe is use actually a 3D viewport here, and then you can render it with the viewport compositor enabled, if that's what you want. but I personally prefer to just leave it here as the image editor because I'll mostly be working with just pre-rendered images in my compositor setup. But what I personally like to use it for is either the asset browser, because that way you can implement node groups which you already have pre-made for the compositor, and you can just drag them in if you have some of those. I personally don't have those pre-made yet, so what I'm gonna be using here instead, or what I'm using most of the time, is the outliner as the Blender file selected, and that way I can see all of the images that I'm using in my blend file, and I can also drag and drop them in here. But in case of the file browser, I don't need that thing in Blender, because on Windows I can just drag and drop image files from a separate window into the Blender window, and they'll automatically get added as nodes. But yes, hopefully you'll now get less frustrated when you just want to do a quick compositing setup in Blender, and you don't want to have all of the hassle of exporting and importing files into some other compositor, Fusion or Nuke. If you want to have that for all of your files, you can go here under the defaults and save this as a startup file. Maybe you want to be in the layout for that, but that way you can just customize the way Blender starts up, and if you then go into the Compositing tab, you'll already have this setup in a way that you like. Okay, I hope this was helpful for you, and thanks for watching.